Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eichelberg, and today is the first of a week's worth of episodes previewing the 97th Academy Awards. I'm joined by Joanne Thornborough from the Pop Goes My Brain newsletter, and today we will be discussing all the technical categories at the Oscars, including Best Sound, Production Design, Cinematography, Makeup and Hairstyling, Costume Design, Film Editing, and Visual Effects. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast to get all the preview episodes this week. And don't forget to leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify to help more movie lovers find the show. So Joanne, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So tell listeners a little bit about yourself before we get started and where they can find your work.
I am a writer, a reader, and a huge film and TV nerd. I've always been that way. And you can find my work on Substack.
Excellent. We'll link to that in the show notes too. And we'll jump right into our categories. So we've got 7 categories to cover today. And we'll start off with the Best Sound category at the Oscars. The nominees in that category are A Complete Unknown, Dune Part 2, Emilia Pérez, Wicked, and The Wild Robots. So any initial thoughts on this list of films for that category on sound?
I like how Dune was nominated again this year, and they were nominated and won in 2022 for the same category. And I'm seeing that, like, right now, it's Dune and Wicked that are in the lead. And I would really be happy if Dune pulled it off. Maybe when Messiah comes out, they can just get across the board.
Yeah, run the whole gamut. Yeah, I would like to see that too. And it'll be I've kind of jotting down my notes. I kind of kept the same theme. I almost wonder if the number of technical wins that Dune had a couple years ago does it a disservice this year if people will kind of shy away from it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think Dune is definitely up there. Wicked is up there. I loved seeing The Wild Robot get a nomination in this
Yes,
category as one of my favorite films of the year.
absolutely.
My favorite animated film. I'm going to be talking animated films tomorrow, but definitely one. Was glad to see it get more than just the animated feature nomination, and I think also a beautifully sound designed film in terms of how the sound contributes to the overall world that they were making in that movie.
I agree. I was thinking about the same thing. When I was going over looking again at the nominations, I'm just like, the whole movie was like flashing through my brain.
Yeah. It's I saw it when it first came out. I think either the first or second weekend we took the whole family to see it, and it's definitely one I've got to go back and watch it again. I've just been haven't had a chance to get returned to it, but I read the book, loved the book, loved the movie, and definitely want to see that do well. The only one of these I haven't seen yet is A Complete Unknown, but obviously that Wicked and Emilia Pérez are all
Yes.
kind of the musical ones.
Yes.
So it'd be interesting to see that. And obviously, I'm going to be talking about Emilia Pérez a lot this week because it's got 13 nominations,
What?
but it's also got a lot of controversy. So I'm wondering if it doesn't have a lot of legs, I don't think, at this point, especially in some of these technical categories that we're talking about today.
Yeah. No, my guess is supporting actress.
Yeah, that's kind of the one I'm thinking of, and maybe one of the songs
Yeah.
if it gets there, because
Yeah.
obviously that's a big part of that film.
I was listening actually to the to All Songs Considered. They actually did an Oscar song and score episode, and they were thinking that it's going to be Mal. They were thinking that's going to be the one that wins.
Yeah, I think that's of the 2 that are nominated from that film, obviously that's a little bit stronger, in my
Yeah,
opinion, but
I agree.
yeah, I don't think it Emilia Pérez not having much of a chance in some of these categories we're talking about today, and Dune being penalized for, already having won a couple of years ago, I think is gonna be my overarching theme in what we talk about today.
No doubt, considering they won 5 out of the 7.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah. So let's move on to Best Production Design. The nominees there are The Brutalist, Conclave, Dune Part 2, Nosferatu, and Wicked. So obviously we see Dune and Wicked both pop up again, but we've got some new names here. I think some of these are really hard to argue the nomination here. I thought in general, The Brutalist was very well designed. It's obviously not everyone's cup of tea in terms of the story and the overall film and the fact that it's 3.5 hours long.
for the intermission.
Exactly, yeah. But the world that they create is really, really incredible. Same thing with Conclave. I think that the recreation of the Sistine Chapel and the other elements of the Vatican were just absolutely stunning. And I'm really kind of pulling for Conclave to win this. Although I think Dune and Wicked are also kind of up there for consideration for this category.
I wasn't a huge fan of The Brutalist, but I have to say I'm kind of between that and Nosferatu for production design. I was thinking about it, and with the Brutalist, I know it's the type of architecture, but it also some of it kind of was like for me it was like reminiscent of Escher's work.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
I can see that.
but I absolutely adored the production, like the technical stuff when it comes to these categories. When it comes to Nosferatu, was like that was like the best thing about the movie, the production, the costumes. So I'm kind of rooting for both of them, and I did take a peek, and it looks like Wicked and the Brutalist are in the lead right now.
Yeah, I mean, I can see really any of these winning. I mean, that there's a lot to like about any of these. Again,
Agree.
Dune, I think it suffers because it won a couple years ago.
Mhm.
I don't know what the fact that Wicked is recreating the world of Oz that we've known for 80 years, from the original. Does that hurt it? Does it help it? Who knows?
But it's the big musical, and it's like they kind of like took the show and put it on screen, so that's
Exactly.
gonna get everybody's attention. Like,
Yeah.
which and they did a great job.
And obviously, Wicked and Dune are both the most popular of these films, at least at the box office.
Yes.
So, I mean, does that sway voters in any way? Let's see. Anything else on those? I don't think I have any other notes.
Nope, I think that covered it for me too.
So we'll move on to production design. I'm sorry, we can't talk about production design without looking at best cinematography. And the nominees there are The Brutalist again, Dune Part 2, Emilia Pérez, Maria, and Nosferatu. So a couple of the same nominees as we had in production design. And I have to say I was shocked that Conclave did not get a best cinematography nomination here.
Great.
If I had one swap, I would probably take out Maria and put in Conclave. I wasn't crazy about Maria as a film overall, which I love Angelina Jolie, but I watched it and it never quite landed for me. I didn't see how you could nominate that film over a film like Conclave. That is there's so much on the screen to look at in every frame of Conclave. It's a shame that it wasn't nominated.
I agree. Conclave is wonderfully shot. I mean, there's no argument about it. But I would probably drop Emilia Perez into Conclave in that
That's the other option, yeah.
because I love the cinematography in Maria. It was I just liked how like certain shots just looked like they were a portrait or a painting, or they really amped up the artistic value of the movie. Even if the story doesn't 100% work, it's just quite a gorgeous just to sit back and just watch it unfold.
Yeah, and I think that may have been what kind of took me out of it was I wasn't crazy about the story. There wasn't enough else there to capture my attention in Maria. Going back to Emilia Perez too, I also think that a lot of what's being nominated here for cinematography is a lot of those dance scenes, the choreographed songs. The one that sticks in my mind is it's towards not the very first one, but towards the beginning where Zoe Saldana is in the red suit and she's dancing around kind of the dinner party,
That's
dancing on the
definitely
tables and
her.
everything. So that's I feel like that scene is what gets nominated here for best cinematography.
Yeah, and that's one of the songs that got nominated too, so
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's El Mal that we were talking about a few minutes ago. Again, Dune, I think it may suffer because of the win a few years ago, though it's a shame if that's the case because it's a beautiful film to look at. There's so much rich textures in there. The scenes in I forget the planet where everything's kind of in the black and white. Obviously,
Mhm.
that's a cinematography choice there.
Yes.
Lot to look at in that film as well.
I did like some of this with the Brutalist, I actually like certain parts of it really stood out, like everything that was shot in Van Buren's senior's house
Yes.
with the library and everything, that just looked like it was heightened in a really great way,
Yeah.
and, everything in Italy.
Oh, the quarries and all of that
Yes.
sequence. Yeah, I thought that sequence in those quarries was probably the best visual part of the film.
Was my favorite.
Yeah, and I also you mentioned the library in Van Buren's house. I really liked kind of the way they juxtaposed Laszlo Toth's poor situation when he first gets there with that extremely opulent house that he's working in. And obviously he progresses a little bit, but it was very they did a good job visually of showing those differences between those two places.
Absolutely.
Anything on Nosferatu before we move off of cinematography? I know you said you really like the production design on that as well.
Yeah, cinematography's right up there as well. It's like one of my 3 favorite things. on production costume and cinematography. I mean, I would be thrilled if I got it, to be honest. But that's it. I know it isn't that Brutalist and Nosferatu are in the top two. For they're in the lead for the win. So fingers crossed they pull it off. But if the Brutalist gets it, I wouldn't be upset.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, next up is Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Nominees there are A Different Man, Emilia Pérez once again, Nosferatu, The Substance, and Wicked. What are your initial thoughts on those?
I am a huge fan of A Different Man. So I would love to see the work that they did actually be rewarded. Because it's like I think it's its only nomination.
Yep.
And especially since Sebastian Stan wasn't nominated for this.
Right. Yeah. He got the Apprentice nomination, but not nominated for this role.
Exactly, which I'm so happy he got a nomination, period.
Yeah.
But I would love to see them if they pulled it off, that would be amazing. But and I'm also a huge fan of The Substance and like how the monster at the New Year's Eve finale was like a combination of practical effects and prosthetics and
Yeah.
CGI. And that Margaret Qualley wore the suit to get into and then everything that went into it. I kind of feel like for Nosferatu that Orlok's dash alone should get an Oscar
Right.
because I think it's like amazing.
Yeah, I agree on A Different Man. I think Sebastian Stan, just disappears into that facial makeup, the prosthetics that he's got there, almost becomes its own character in itself, and makes that character more believable as we go throughout that film.
Yes.
I agree also on The Substance. I personally was not a huge fan of the last 20 minutes of the film with the monster creation, but I understand and appreciate what goes into something like that, in addition to all of the other progressive changes that go on in Demi Moore's character throughout the
Oh,
film.
yes.
So I personally, if I was voting, I think I would put The Substance first in this particular
Yeah.
category. But yeah, I think A Different Man or The Substance are both really strong options there.
I definitely agree. I mean, The Substance, I would definitely love to see win, and I noticed that it's between right now, it looks like it's between that and Wicked.
Yeah, and I feel like with Wicked, I feel like the nomination there. I know they put some kind of prosthetic ears over Cynthia Erivo's ears so that she didn't have to take out all of her piercings and stuff like that. I feel like that's the sort of thing that's getting nominated here. Which, okay, whatever. Yeah,
What's all the green skin, you know?
yeah. I mean, it's
And Jeff Goldblum at the end.
right, right. The other one too we haven't really mentioned is Emilia Pérez here. Obviously, we've kind of already talked about the controversy, but I have to admit I came into that film not knowing anything about the plot or anything about it, and when I saw the first 20-30 minutes where the main character is a man, I was actually questioning, is it a man playing a woman or is it a woman playing a man? And obviously once it was over, I went back and I kind of learned everything that went into that. So and to me, that the makeup at the beginning when the character is a man, I didn't think it was that well done. To be honest with you, it looked kind of rough. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I had a similar thought when I watched it, like, late last year.
Yeah, and I actually almost preferred, if I was gonna nominate something for makeup in that film, I would almost be more impressed with the makeup and hair effects on Selena Gomez's character. She's a blonde throughout most of the film, and I thought the way they made up her character was a lot more believable than the lead in the film.
Yes, that's a good point.
And with makeup and hairstyling, obviously goes best costume design. Some familiar nominees here. We've already talked about a couple of them: A Complete Unknown, Conclave, Gladiator 2 with its only nomination, Nosferatu again, and Wicked again as well. So some four that we've already talked about a little bit, and then the newcomer Gladiator that we haven't touched on yet. So who would be your choice for best costume design?
I gotta go with Nosferatu. Those costumes were amazing. I do love the costumes for Wicked. I can't argue. I mean, they're just really fun and just gorgeous all around. It is kind of cool to note that if Paul Tazewell, who was nominated for Wicked, if he wins, he will be the first black male designer to win.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and apparently there were 25 looks for Glinda and Elphaba, plus the world of Shiz, Much Glen, and the Emerald City, and Glinda's pink bubble dress involved 137 pattern pieces and required 225 hours to hand beat a single bodice.
Oh my god, that is incredible.
Yeah.
That just astounds me. The care and
Yeah.
detail that goes into some of those things. And it always amazes me, especially in film. It amazes me with costumes because a lot of times, you see those costumes on screen for seconds or minutes, and 500 times as much time went into actually making you, and you hardly see him in some instances. And obviously, you don't see as much of that detail in a lot of those cases too. So
Right.
it's my hats off to any of the people in these categories.
I will say, will add, I should say, for Nosferatu, Linda Muir, who's nominated. If anybody's interested, either a huge fan of the film and her work on that, or just of costume design in general, her Instagram is a treasure trove for fans of film.
Yeah,
And one of the some of the photos she took were, for the Abbess costume in Nosferatu, and the detail, it's, like, insane. There's, like, this piece in the middle, and it's all, like, so hand stitched, and the detail that went into it. I mean, that literally you could just frame that and put it on a wall. It's,
sure.
like, it's stunning, honestly. So, it just to see her, I'm just really glad that she got nominated.
Yeah. Yeah, and obviously we have, I mentioned Gladiator. It's only a nomination for this time around. Obviously, it had many more nominations with the first film. I did look, so the Janty Yates is the one for best costume design with the original Gladiator. Obviously, was back for this one. All I want to know about that one is where I can get some of the robes that Denzel's character wore in that film. He was dressed so
Yes.
impeccably throughout the film, which is obviously a big part of his character.
That's the nomination right there.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Just pull up all of Denzel's wardrobe from that film, and that's your nomination. And then I actually have to say, I my favorite of this group was Conclave. I'm kind of stumping for Conclave in a bunch of these categories. Obviously, you're dressing, a couple hundred of these cardinals, and pretty much everybody's wearing the same, red, black, all that sort of thing. But there's a couple scenes where there's a whole collection of them together, and they're all ever so slightly different. There's little details from the various cultures and various places from around the world where those characters come from, and I thought that was really, really well done in terms of how those various costumes were put together, even though the basis for them is all essentially the same.
Absolutely.
So we'll move on from best costume design and look at best film editing. So the nominees there are Honora, The Brutalist, Conclave, Emilia Perez, and Wicked. So all ones we've already touched on, except for Honora so far.
And Nora is definitely my favorite of the nominees. I love the film in general, but it really helps that Sean Baker, who also directed, is also doing the editing,
Yeah,
and he knows what he wants to look like. It's all in his head, and he can just get into the program and just do what he needs to do to make the film come alive the way he sees it.
and he wrote it too, so it's
Yeah,
all
I was gonna say it's
that
one of the four.
whole
Yeah,
whole
this is one of
package.
4 nominations for him.
I'm in agreement that Honora is kind of the top of the list in this one. I wrote down it's almost 2.5 hours, but it doesn't feel that long. It feels like it's maybe an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. It's so well paced, so well put together, and I think to your point that goes back to he knew what he was shooting, he knew what he was writing, he knew how he was going to edit it all, so he had that vision from the beginning. On the other hand, The Brutalist is 3.5 hours that feels sometimes like 4 or 5. And I understand what he was going for, I think, and, with the whole thing with the intermission,
Mhm.
but, there's my wife and kids and I were actually just watching The Sound of Music the other day, and I had forgotten that there was an intermission in that, but I can think of half a dozen movies off the top of my head, from Sound of Music, Ben-Hur, Gone with the Wind, that were at least as long, if not even a little bit longer than The Brutalist, and don't feel that long, if that makes sense.
That would totally make sense. I understand it completely.
The other one too, Conclave, again, kind of talked about the similarities of the costumes, but so much of that movie is guys sitting in a room writing names on papers and dropping them in a jar. But it feels like it has you on the edge of your seat somehow for stuff like that, which is really, I think, is a testament to how well edited that film is.
Yeah. What was it, like 3 or at least 5 scenes, and you're just like the entire
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, that's not even to touch on the kind of big reveal at the last balloting that, obviously everybody's probably seen from the trailers, but, don't wanna spoil it in case folks haven't seen the film yet. I also think too, trying to distill a 300, almost 400-page novel into a 2-hour movie is really well done in that case as well, and some of that goes to the script, but obviously it goes into the editing also.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Any thoughts on, Emilia Perez or Wicked in terms of editing?
Not much for Emilia Perez. The editing, I kind of feel like it comes down to the musical numbers again, because I feel like that's where the energy in that movie is. It's just a slog if you take out the musical numbers, because it kind of just saps it of its energy.
Yeah, and I think if it had been a strictly crime thriller, like it wanted to kind of dip its toe in that genre, I think it would have been an hour 45 or something like that. And I'd be okay with that movie. I would watch that. It didn't need the music necessarily, but I think a lot of that editing comes down to some of those, like we were talking with cinematography earlier, that those musical numbers, those choreographed dance scenes.
Yes. And Wicked, it moves along. There isn't really a slow spot in it, so it just keeps going, going, going. And part of that is the editing. They knew what they were doing.
Yeah, and it moves, and yet there are still a few scenes. I'm trying to think of the one specifically that I'm thinking of. Is it at the party, maybe? I can't remember now. There's one or two scenes where it does actually kind of slow down and take its time for a little bit, which I think is good because there's definitely a potential for that movie to just feel like it's going, 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 kind of like you're watching it on stage and everything's, one scene ends, the next scene picks up right away. So I'm glad they did give it a couple chances to stop and breathe a little bit.
Yeah, like the scenes with Ethelba and the professor, and then like you said, the scene at the dance at the club or wherever it was, that it just gives it a minute to breathe before it launches into something the second act or
Yeah, and obviously we all know the songs, so we kind of know the pacing of that already, and I think they did a good job of sticking with the general pacing from the show that everybody knows from the stage. So we'll move on to our final category here for today, best visual effects. The nominees for best visual effects are Alien Romulus, Better Man, Dune Part 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and Wicked one more time. I think Wicked's been in every single category we've talked about today, except maybe cinematography. Yeah, it has. I'm
yeah.
going back through my list. Obviously, we've got two films here with computer generated apes. We've got an alien, some sandworms, and whatever it is in Wicked, everything and everything from the Land of Oz. Yes. So I think this is another one where Dune could potentially suffer because of the win a couple years ago. I think if it does win, it's perfectly fine because there's a lot of I've seen a couple of kind of featurettes online where they show kind of the different layers that they put in digitally for some of the scenes, especially with the sandworms and the sandstorms and things like that. And the lengths they go to make some of those look so believable just astounds me. And that technology is getting so good. It's often, I think, a lot of times when it's done well, it's hard to tell what's real and what's not.
Absolutely, because you can almost feel like you can with the visual effects, you can almost like you can reach out and touch the sandworm. You can just like almost
Yeah,
leap on top of it like they do and just like ride it out
right.
like an Uber.
Yeah, and I think in terms of Kingdom of Planet of the Apes and Better Man, I think in Better Man the ape character, I feel like it's too much of a gimmick, even if it's well done. I feel like the whole thing about that movie is it's a music rock star movie, but the main character is a monkey. Whereas Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and I look back, the all three of the previous Rise,
Yep,
Dawn, War have all been nominated. None of them have won. I feel like this is the one where it could kind of cross that point and actually win here. And I remember I watched it, I think right around Christmas time, came on streaming, and I was just blown away by how well integrated into the landscapes the characters were. Obviously, you've got a few human characters, but 99% of everything in that movie is all CGI, and it's hard to tell.
absolutely. I the first one, Rise, was good in terms of the visual effects, but then just it really hit its stride with Dawn, and then with War because I think part of it probably helped Matt Reeves was directing, so I think he knew what to look for the
Right.
visual artists and everything to come into it, and they learned. Obviously, I think the studio paid attention and they learned. You can tell that they've learned their lessons from the previous movies, and it's
Right.
just like you said, it's just become so assimilated into it. It's just like you can't even tell which way or the other, whether it's real or it's CGI.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's one. I'm just thinking back to some of the specific scenes in that. Obviously, there's I forget the human, the female there, her characters. Well, I know, I guess she's another Nova. I think they call her. I think there's a couple scenes where she's kind of riding on the horse behind one of the apes, and there's nothing there that really shows that she's not actually behind an ape. And then there's also one scene where they're on like a bridge and they kind of fall in the water, and
Mhm.
obviously water interacting with anything CGI is always difficult, but again, there's nothing that I can complain about there in terms of how those scenes came across.
No, absolutely not. It's one of my favorite things about watching the movies.
And then the other two, Wicked. I'm almost wondering if this is in part a call out to everything that they were able to do with practical effects, because I know there's a lot that went into the train to Oz. I think a lot of that was a practical effect.
Yes.
I saw something about the head of the wizard in the city that that was a lot of it was done practically. Obviously, a lot of it's enhanced, but a lot of the practical effects that are then boosted by the digital effects as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in Wicked that it's not a surprise it got the nomination. And both the train and the giant head are definitely things, but just throughout. I know I'm trying to think of it.
Oh, you mentioned the monkeys, earlier, that scene that was in the trailer where they're kind of flying around the bridge. That was a big scene.
Yeah, and even like the smaller things, like at the beginning when you find out that her Elphaba's nanny was a bear.
Yeah,
And there were the animals who were like actually servants in the house. So like there's those little things too. It's not just the big designs. It's
yeah.
also like the smaller ones that you kind of forget about as the movie moves forward.
Right. Yeah, and just going back to Alien Romulus, one we haven't touched on, I was actually a little bit surprised to go back and rediscover that both the first two Alien movies won in this category back in the 70s and early 80s. So that was interesting to see. Also, Alien 3 did get a nomination here. So obviously, there's good trend of Alien films at least getting nominated and early on getting wins in this category. I think it's up against a little bit too much of some hard competition this year to actually win, but I think it's good to see that franchise, return to this area and, at least get the nomination here like it did 40 years ago.
Yeah, I've gotta admit I was a little surprised to see it nominated. I mean, the visual effects in Romulus are fantastic, but at the same time, this is the technical stuff is where like the more popcorn movies
Right.
tend to thrive,
Yep.
whether it's like your Marvel movies or your horror sci-fi franchises. So I shouldn't have been, but I'm kind of surprised. I'm happy, but I'm also
Yeah.
kind of surprised I got it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. And I actually meant to mention this before too. I think when we were talking about costume design, I meant to you said horror movies tend to show up here. And I was surprised and happy to see or no, not it wasn't costume design, it was makeup, because that's where Substance and Nosferatu both got nominated. So obviously Nosferatu is horror film, a little more artsy of a horror film, but horror film nonetheless. Nomination there. Good to see horror getting a little bit more recognition, and obviously Substance, more of a body horror, but really good to see that getting nominations, not just in some of these technical categories, but across the board on up into some of the big ones at the end as well.
I'm so happy to see that.
So I think that's our last category for today. But before I let you go, I wanted to get your pick for Best Picture. So who do you think should win Best Picture, and who do you think will win if they're different films?
I think my answer for both is Anora. In terms of should win, I fell in love with it at first sight. I mean, it was just so fantastic of a movie. And I've been a fan of Sean Baker's for a while, but this just kind of he definitely upped his game. And Mikey Madison is
Oh
fantastic.
yeah, she's phenomenal.
I mean, I was a fan of her when she played Pamela Adlon's eldest daughter in Better Things. And you could see the potential, especially by towards the end as the show progressed. You could totally see her potential. She just needed that, and then Sean Baker gave it to her. You just needed that little breakout moment, and she got it from him. And I'm very happy. And I'm not sure she'll win Best Actress, but I wouldn't be upset if she did.
Yep, me neither. Well, Joanne, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to talk about the Oscars for this year. Remind listeners one more time where they can find your work online.
Pop Goes My blog is on Substack, and I tend to post twice a month. So
Excellent. Well, we'll look for you there. And obviously, don't forget to follow the Oscar Project at theoscarproject.substack.com. And if you're listening to this prior to the 97th Academy Awards, you still have time to enter my Oscar prediction contest. You can head over to my Substack page and submit your guesses before the ceremony on Sunday. I'll be back tomorrow with another preview episode where Enrico Banson and I will talk through the animated, international, and documentary feature categories, along with both music categories. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at the movies.